Good evening, everyone. So my name is Michael Savides, and today we have the beautiful Mayte Carvalho today, all the way from Brazil, but now living in Los Angeles, California. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the invitation.
Of course, of course. So the way we typically go about is I would like to introduce those that have not joined Startup Grind before, and this is their first Startup Grind event. Startup Grind is a global community of entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors, and we are in over 130 countries around the world. This chapter being the Startup Grind West LA chapter with over 7,000 community members, one of the largest in the actual world when it comes to Startup Grind chapters, and one which we are very proud of. We've hosted many great guests in the past, so you're just adding to that tonight, so thank you for that. So Startup Grind, as I mentioned, is a global community, and what we base and what a lot of our things on, what our values is, make friends, not contacts, and we really live by that. And it's unfortunate we can't have in-person events again. We did start having them again, and then obviously back to the restrictions. So the virtual events we'll have to do for now. But this allows us to connect with more people, to be fair. So before we get into it, I do want to give a bit of a background on our guest today. So without further ado, our guest, a marketeer, best-selling author, a professor, currently serves as a director of business strategy at TBWA in Los Angeles. She was elected by GQ magazine as one of Brazil's 6 great female founders. Mayte Carvalho is an entrepreneur with a tech and venture background, where she applies this to her new role in advertising and comms. Her best-selling book, Persuasion, a practical guide, was launched in Brazil, where it essentially prepares the reader for the challenges of the communication and expression in a workplace and the personal relationships. She sold more copies, listen to this, than Rich Dad Poor Dad in the last quarter of 2020, something I'm sure you're very proud of, and we definitely will delve into that. So due to your book success during the International Women's Month this year, Amazon actually invited Mayte to read the book's chapters as a mini classes, becoming the first female human voice for Alexa in Latin America. Amazing, amazing.
So crazy, right?
Right, so crazy. I mean, living in this world, I definitely want to delve into that. Before we carry on, so Mayte is also the winner of Brazil's version of the Apprentice Special edition, and she also fundraised for her startup on the world famous Sharktank. I know a lot of our audience that are listening are aspiring entrepreneurs, are entrepreneurs, and are looking for funding. And this is a show that I personally watched growing up, and I would love to hear more about doing that, and we will delve into that. Where you also pitched onto Sharktank your beauty pharmacy company, which was a mobile app further as well, where you became the #1 app in the Brazilian App Store. She's also part of AdWeek's exclusive mentorship 2021 cohort. This woman has no boundaries, everyone, as you can hear. And last but not least, in an interview, you do mention that you have this side hustle by being a rhetoric professor. So I do want to discuss that as well. Where lastly, you share an innovation and communication content on your social media, where you have over 60,000 followers on your Instagram. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mayte Carvalho. Thank you for setting aside the time, and we're happy to have you come share your story on Startup Grind.
Thank you so much, Mike. Yes, I mean, yes. Even listening to it, I'm like, damn, I did all those things.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic, and it's inspirational regardless of who the audience is. So. Also, I'm not sure you know, this is obviously Diversity Month. We're celebrating that in Startup Grind, which is also part of the reason why I wanted to have you on as a guest on our chapter, because there's a few things I'd like to discuss about being a woman, not only in tech, but in business, and some of the obstacles that you had to come over. But going back, let's go to the beginning of your journey. What did you study? What was your first venture? Take us through the initial steps of your successful entrepreneurship life, before you actually started going into Shark Tank and going into the Apprentice and so on.
Awesome, yes. So basically, I have a graduation. I'm a communication and marketing major. And before being an entrepreneur, I used to work for large conglomerates of advertising, such as WPP. So, yes, I worked for great advertising and also new content that was acquired by Accenture, because this was a huge movement, like consulting firms acquiring independent agencies and then, migrating their services and offerings even to advertising, kind of cannibalizing advertising agencies. So I kind of faced that in Brazil in the very beginning of my career after I had just graduated. And the Apprentice TV show, I was a contestant when I was 18 years old. So I was super young. And it was a college edition, special edition. So it was a kind of different format. Pretty much The Apprentice, like you're hired, you're fired, but a different format because everyone was, in college. So we were everyone was young, and the prize was of course money, but then the internship. So I had this opportunity, being super young, to work with Brazil's most powerful CEO, which by the time was Roberto Justus. Like, he was the host of The Apprentice, and that experience was a major shift and a point of inflection of my career, because I remember like having friends my age, and they had like bosses. There were like coordinators or managers, and I was like this. So it was a little bit very beginning because I was super naive, unexperienced, and junior. And the guy was like, a billionaire.
And you were 18 years old at the time.
Yes. And I
Wow.
was just a freshman in college. I was doing my
Yeah.
very first semester. I had no idea. First semester of everything, you don't really know what you're studying or doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at that age,
Like,
especially.
you're there for the parties and the vibe. You're like, okay, what is a briefing? What is a marketing campaign? Anyway, I had to, I became like a mature, let's say, super young, and I think it was a good thing, but definitely like I did not had a proper college experience, and like, and by the time I was 22 years old, I was already a manager. So I
Yeah.
remember like I was not taking classes at college because I had like client meetings with like my C-suite levels. And I was like, this is bananas. I don't need to go to college anymore because I'm already, you know, doing $1 million contracts, and like I have a lot of responsibility. So, but eventually I graduated, and then I was done with it. You know what? Like, I don't want to work with advertising anymore. I thought it was time to reinvent myself, especially when being a contestant from a reality show, you always question yourself, like, am I here because, there was a sense of meritocracy in this, or just because I won the TV show? Like, I had no idea how the world outside of this, you know, advertising group was, and I needed to have this experience by myself. It was large and larger than advertising or whatever. It was like, yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to be attached to this the apprentice thing forever. It was nice and it was awesome, and it's always going to be part of my history. But by the moment, I needed to experience something new. So I was like, what? A new reality show, Shark Tank. No. But
That's actually quite funny because you went with one that was probably more relevant at the time, right? And I mean,
it
it
was
seems like you've somehow mastered these things because you've been successful in both respective competitions, effectively,
To be
right?
fair, to be honest, it was very random and just a funny coincidence, because the producers of the show were the same producers of The Apprentice, and they saw on my LinkedIn or Facebook, because I became friends with them, that I was an entrepreneur now, and they were like, "Oh, this girl, like she's our acquaintance. Like, why not? Let's invite her. And by the time I was an early stage entrepreneur, I had just started my first app.
Yeah, so let me stop you there. So
Okay.
I mean, first of all, because I want to get as much information and value out of this conversation as possible for the audience, of course. So, have done the apprentice. Obviously, you grew significantly in the age and in professionalism, and I think at the age of 18, even 19, I mean, I can't even think back to what I was doing at that stage, probably first year in university. Definitely, like you were saying, the maturity at that stage in your life is not what it would be at for a person that would be joining that kind of show midway through their career. So, I mean, first of all, that's incredible. And now I know that obviously with Sharktank, you took your beauty app there and you presented it there. And I know you obviously quite successful in your own right there. So before you take us through the Sharktank experience, tell us how you started this beauty business that eventually led you to Shark Tank. Where was the business at? Had you received funding before? And why did you start that business essentially?
Awesome. Because I saw an inefficiency, therefore an opportunity, basically, as any entrepreneur. I used to work for beauty brands in Brazil, large conglomerates. And because of that experience, I found out most of the beauty products that you buy, they're basically they're the same. You're mostly paying the brand. And it was like by the time now it's like, oh really? Aha, like you're not a genius. But by the time, like 6 years ago, we still kind of believed, in those the brand equity factor of it. Because now we have like Beauty Pie, that is a startup that is doing basically the same thing, but they came after we did. But by the time, it was kind of crazy, especially in the third world country like Brazil tends to look up to prestige brands or foreigner brands because the perception of quality is higher. So working in the industry, I was like, Jesus, it was like this shampoo is basically like the soap that you use to wash your dishes. So I was trying to democratize access to real information regarding to beauty, and it was the very beginning of this clean beauty movement. So the app compared beauty products. So it was a marketplace essentially, the business model, and a little bit of a audience business because we were B2C, so we rely on having an audience to consume it, but also the merchants. That's why I consider more of a marketplace, even though it wasn't transactional at first. It was purely content information. It began as a blog. I was like a beauty blogger by the time. It was my side hustle. Meanwhile, I was working for the advertising agency. So when I left, I was like, okay, I have a few bucks in my account. I have this blog. What should I do? And by the time 2014, being a blogger or like a YouTuber influencer was not what it is today. It was not an industry at all, at least not in Brazil. Because we got to understand, like, so many waves, they come later to Brazil, like here in LA, okay, you're an influencer like everyone, it's a respectable profession and like a gig, but there it was almost like
And
sketchy and shady, like what?
yeah, I get, and the ironic thing is, you look at that industry alone today. I mean, that is what's driving a lot of young individuals now to being actually successful through social media, through being a content creator, and I think we can get into that as well as also being an influencer in this space now, which is obviously you took advantage of something that maybe was premature in Brazil at the time. Would you agree to that?
Yes, completely. But as so many times when you're the first mover, you're the first to get the shot when you pass through the door. Like so many times being the second mover or even the third mover, you do have an advantage. So in that case, uh, I'm not saying, oh my God, the startup is not like a unicorn right now because of timing, because I was a genius ahead of my time. I'm not that kind of delusional person. I'm just saying that maybe there wasn't an appetite for that at the moment. Plus, a lot of things that I can describe later, just as like, cost of acquisition versus lifetime value ratio. It was really hard to compensate that. And when you're fundraising for a B2C marketplace, so many venture capital funds, they do not have the appetite for that. Most of them, they want like business to business software as a services companies, that they will be less cash consuming, cash burning operations. We were at a, but before that, okay, sorry, I went way ahead of.
That's fine.
So I saw an opportunity to, present this content that would demystify beauty brands and skincare products, basically saying, this brand you can pay like half the price and it's as good as this one. Or
Okay.
sometimes it's like you want to, paint your nail with this Dior nail polish, but it's $50, but you can use the Sally Hansen one. It's the same color, same quality for $5. So it was a drugstore dupe comparison, like a matchmaker.
Yeah.
Even the UX, it was like a Tinder.
Okay, so you were actually doing
Yeah.
almost a product comparison in its own right,
Yeah,
allowing
we
people.
sold the product.
Okay, and so you, I mean that's super interesting. So you created an alternative for individuals that perhaps couldn't afford their more expensive brands, but the quality which you were very well versed in and knowledgeable about, you were offering them this alternative, and that's where you saw the market gap. Is that correct?
Yes, and our vision was to democratize access to beauty, especially because we were living in Brazil a recession period, and a recession time. So we really needed affordable options to swap products, and it was happening with the Brazilian women, and like the market was huge. Like the average Brazilian women, she spends more money in beauty products and services than education and food. It's a
Do you
it's a
think
big
that? Do
total
you think that?
addressable market.
I
Sorry?
mean, do you think there's any difference to the US, the United States? In a first world country, one being a developing country, do you see a difference, or do you just feel like in Brazil?
In the US is one of the top three largest markets for beauty products and services. It's, when you compare total addressable market, US is bigger than Brazil. But you have to, when you put the perspective of GDP in like per capita income, and then it's crazy because you can go to an actual favela and you will find someone doing manicure and pedicure and like beauty services. It's not like an elite prestige thing here in LA. I kind of feel like not everyone goes to a beauty salon. Like people do it themselves, in Brazil, because you have workforce available and they're willing to do services, because there's a huge social inequality, social disparity when it comes to
Yeah.
wealth. So you can actually get your nails done for like $5, and
Yeah.
here
It's,
it's
the,
like
it's,
ninety
it's, it's
ninety
the same
dollars.
thing in it's the same thing in South Africa where I'm from. So I can totally relate. So
Yeah.
okay, let's go. So now you started this business. You've identified a gap in the market. How long did you start that business before you actually went into Shark Tank? What is
Okay.
that whole? Let's talk about the business, starting the business, and where you went to Shark Tank. And what happened after Shark Tank?
The moment I went to Shark Tank, we were, soft launching. It was not an MVP anymore, but I can say it was a beta version of the app. But we had some traction, like by the time I was a newcomer entrepreneur. So like, even if you see my pitch on Shark Tank, you're gonna see that I was like, we have more than, I don't know, like 50,000 downloads, and then by the time I had no idea, like, okay, you need to those are vanity metrics. You need to observe like daily active users and engagement and average revenue per
Important,
user.
right? Yeah.
I was a marketeer trying to be a CEO, you know?
Yeah,
So,
for the audience, that's a very good takeaway to have. Is it doesn't matter how many downloads your app has; it's more to do with engagement. And I've also pitched to investors where they've mentioned the same thing: the importance of having regular and continued engagement as opposed to having the downloads. The downloads, of course, is a good metric to look at initially to see the brand reputation out there. But and I'm sure you would agree is that a genuine, regular, continuous engagement with your audience is far more valuable and far more what these investors would be looking at, right? So, I mean, tell us how that whole pitch went, why you think you did well, and for the audience that hasn't watched that video, I watched it the other day. I thought it was quite interesting. Obviously, I had to brush up on my Portuguese, to be fair. But yeah, take us through how that experience was, because we all watch it on TV. I know most of us watch the American one, but the Brazil one is just as prestigious, and I'm sure the sharks were just as intimidating. How did that go? And take us through that whole experience.
sure. So it was, to give a little bit of context to the audience, it was the very first Shark Tank edition in Brazil. We had no idea who the sharks were. They haven't told us. So I found out the day I went shooting, a little bit before getting on stage. And that was, a competitive disadvantage because therefore I was not aware of their style to approach and negotiate, because when you watch the show and you're like, oh, Mark Cuban is XYZ, Mr. Wonderful is blah, blah, blah. So you can kind of shape your pitch accordingly. I was like doing a standard pitch because I was like, I don't know who's coming.
Yeah, you almost went in there blind, right?
Yeah.
Going in there blind. Okay.
And the day before shooting, so the producer, it was the very first edition. That's why I was like part of the speed dial of someone because they needed casting. And I saw this, between us here and whoever is listening to us. I was 100% facing this opportunity as like publicity. I was not interested in the investment at all. I just wanted, because my app was consumer facing app. So I was like, and publicity is good publicity. Like, like so many women watch the show, they're going to download our app. So it's free advertisement in television. 10 minutes, like bring it on, branded content purely. If I happen to win a shark attention and appetite to invest, awesome. But that was like my second agenda.
I love that. I love that.
With this I was like trying to be a growth hacker,
It's super strategic. It's very strategic, to be fair.
I needed awareness and like share a voice and like, because my brand was nothing. We have just launched. To be fair, I had one article on Vogue saying how amazing the app was because, the girls were freaking out, but it was almost like a very beauty savvy thing only for bloggers, beauty bloggers and vloggers. It was not part of the large audience conversation. And so I prepared myself, and the day before they called me saying, you're not on the show anymore, sorry. But yeah, if you want, we cannot guarantee you'll shoot, but you can come tomorrow and wait. And then I had already organized myself there. Like you have to prepare. People don't know, but at least in Brazil, you have to prepare what you're bringing, to the table set and stuff. So I was like, okay, I just spent my whole day preparing and training the pitch. You only have 3 minutes. You have to be sharp. I don't know my audience. So it's like writing this love letter to someone I don't know. It's very like, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to show up because I'm prepared. So if they just,
to be honest, you have nothing to lose.
So I went there and, studio. So very clumsy and like disorganized. when I arrived there like 9 a.m. and I went to the studio to shoot, it was like 11 p.m. So I was like part of the wait list, and all the so tired. They were like, "Oh no, another one, another pitch." And
Yeah.
in my head, I was like, "Oh my god, they're bankrupt right now because they invested." Every time someone laughed in the studio, of like, "Hey, I got a million, whatever," and I was like, "Damn, they're
So,
draining their
okay.
pockets."
Okay. I mean, that's interesting because that doesn't normally happen on any other print. I mean, Shark Tank show.
The way they broadcast is not necessarily how we shoot the same day. They because
Um,
they tend to cut the episodes and they
yeah.
all wear the same clothes every shooting. So, okay, I went to the studio and it was a complete mess, like train wreck. Because you're not supposed to say like good night or good evening because they will
They'll
show
cut it out. So they'll
they'll
cut it out.
broadcast
Yeah.
maybe during the morning. So you have this specific orientation of like, do not say good evening, sharks. You just say like, hello, sharks.
Uh,
I am XYZ and my offer is blah, blah, blah. It's like a template and you need to do it. So I got so nervous that I needed to, like give this line that I made it like not kidding, like 5 times of like, good evening, sharks. And then the producer was like, again. And I was like, good evening, sharks.
oh gosh. I
They
mean,
were
it
so
can throw
pissed.
you off. It can throw you off, right?
And I was like, damn, I started off like real bad. But
Yeah.
then after that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna own it because at the end of the day, I'm a rhetoric professor, so I know how to do it. And then I was like, drown. I was like, ba 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 ba. Told my pitch, made a Q&A. One of the sharks was really bully about my business model.
Yeah.
She used to work for a prestige brand, so she was attacked personally. So you're basically saying it's bullshit. And I was trying to mirror her and be polite to get off this tough situation. And I realized one of the sharks, she was like, I got 5 no's, okay? All of them, they said no. No, oh my god, I love you, you're the best, you're so smart, but not my type of investment. I don't see myself contributing to your business. Every one of them, they said no. One of the sharks, I was like, she said no, but her body language was
So it
telling
is.
that she was into it.
Okay.
I made a counter offer to her.
Okay.
A counter offer to her.
What was the counter offer?
I was raising
Well, actually, how much were you raising for, and for how much percentage in the business were you asking?
150K. Was not that much for like 10%.
Okay.
I was starting with like 1.5 million valuation, which I thought was like the accelerator deal. Like YC, those.
Y Combinator that you.
In your early stage is usually the deal
Yeah.
they offer. So I had this in my mind, and I had to counter offer it. But she was very aggressive. She counter offered me 35%, which was the most stupid thing because kind of ruined my cap table. And
Wait, let's stop this. So for people listening and for the audience that will be watching and recording, this is some valuable advice now, if you think about it. Like you saying it's stupid because it ruined your cap table. Explain to the audience why I do that, because I think a lot of people that are pitching to venture capitalists now will find themselves in a situation where they are asking for a certain amount based on the valuation that they believe their business is valued at. And we all know that's often a fictitious amount, but it's part and parcel of doing pitches to venture capitalists. So explain to me why you think that had a detrimental effect on your cap table, and please provide some advice to the audience that find themselves in similar situation to avoid what you actually went through.
awesome. So just to kind of clarify a little bit the difference between venture capital investment and like private equity investment,
Yeah.
or the real market, not a speculative investment. I used to think like if you have at least 50% of your business you're killing it because you have more than 50%.
Yeah.
That was my mentality of like a business that monetizes out of dividends. If you have a restaurant, if you have a bakery, if you have a flower shop or whatever, it works for real market kind of endeavors. When you're talking about startups, it's basically speculative uh, venture capital. So um, that's why we're talking about evaluation and not evaluate. It's always like happening, and it's very intangible to define evaluation of an early stage company. So in my mind, because I was naive, I was a young entrepreneur. I thought if I still kept 75%, which was the case, sorry, 65% because she was offering 35, I was going to be in a good situation because it was more than 50%. Common mistake happens all the time. And the thing is, so when you're in an early stage startup, you actually need to have, as a founder, you have to have equity of your own company to keep going, because the very first angel investment stage, oh my god, it's just the beginning. You'll have like seed, or like a pre-seed one, series A, series B, series C,
Yeah.
series C, and then maybe an exit or an IPO. So this is a long journey, and the funds that will come after this, one of the main things they're going to analyze is how much equity the founder or the co-founding team has of their own startup. And if they happen to have less than, like 70 or 80%, sometimes 90%, depending on the stage, they know for sure the founding team will be liquidated eventually. Like they are going to pulverize their stocks. Therefore, they won't be as committed to it as they should.
Correct.
It's
Correct. Yeah.
basically you don't have equity of the company you own anymore. So it's frustrating, and on the long run, you kind of dooming the deal to fail. Because I remember being told by Red Point Ventures, they were super interested, and they were like, we're only investing Series A if you convince your former investor to reduce her equity, to dilute her position, because this is bananas. Like, even as a serious entrepreneur investor, like, she shouldn't do it, because she's kind of burning the deal for you and for herself, because she's anchoring it, and now like nobody will see this deal as interesting. So you need to negotiate this ASAP for your business sake. And
So
fortunately,
this is brilliant advice for people starting out with their own startups and looking for angel investment, seed investment, venture capitalists down the line. Your initial steps will dictate what the future of your company will look like. And if you're not experiencing it, and if you don't have a mentor, someone to like this conversation you and I have now, a lot of people set themselves up for failure. Not intentionally, but due to lack of knowledge and perhaps advice or experience. So I think that this is such a valuable thing. So going back now, so you got your investment from the shark. What was after you did that? Because as I understand now, you're not involved in that business any longer, right?
yeah, we closed
Okay.
operations to tell officially.
Okay, why is
It
that?
was, so after Shark Tank, it was early stage, gave us a lot of attention. I was very smart to monetize that and used momentum to attract other investors. But then again, cap table issue. So we went to an acceleration program, a really good one. It was part of the DVN, Draper Venture Network. They have this the beta which is their fund for Latin American investments. We were part of the early stage fund that is, they have a partnership with Draper. So it was a solid investor, and we could see like, a road fundraising in the future. We were in good hands. I completely pivoted. I pivot the whole business model because, selling ads is kind of nonsense when you're starting a startup.
Yeah,
So you
especially
Google and Facebook, and you cannot beat that lead. But I was
yeah,
just a marketeer with a marketing lens. So I was like, okay, we're going to monetize selling ads because it was the quickest answer. But as time goes by, I was like, this is unsustainable. So even though we did some partnerships like for beauty brands and stuff, especially mostly because of my speed dial and connections, it was not like a sustainable business model. So I pivoted into a subscription based one for beauty services, and then we became a beauty class pass, and then I switched the name to B Pass, but I kept the same cap table in the same business organization. I kept the same investors because they invested in me mostly in the idea, but not the business or the technology itself because it was really early stage. So it was more like we're investing on the jockey and not the horse by the time.
yeah, and that's also something worth sharing. I've experienced myself pitching to investors that they will more specifically be interested in you as an individual as opposed to the business idea. Because quite rightly so, in your scenario, you iterated the business, you pivoted, and that's always going to be quite typical of the first 10 years. I think it's going to change. So I think to the audience listening, you have to present yourself in a way that makes you seem more attractive than your actual idea. And I think your story is testament to that.
Yeah.
But do continue.
You have to be committed to finding a solution. So fall in love with the problem product because it's gonna change. So I was, my obsession was like, how can I improve women's relationship with their own beauty and self-esteem? So therefore, I was open to whatever, because I was open to hypothesize and test and learn. We had a critical, like feeling completely. I felt like I was lost because I was so open to change because I was this missionary kind of entrepreneur that wants to solve a real problem that I was not attached to it that much. So I was like almost testing new experiments every week before deciding to pivot into this new one. But then at one of those sprints, I told my co-founder, my CTO, like, if I sell like more than 50 subscriptions of this in a week, because sometimes you got to be almost like, like 15 subscriptions in a week. So we validated the business model,
Yeah.
we were like so searching for like 3 months. And I remember so tip number 2, do not fundraise when you're super early stage. Just don't, because it's gonna be frustrating. And I was anxious because every month I had to share a report what I said. We don't have a business model yet, but I'm working on that. But if I did not have like
Brilliant.
investors, the pressure is going to be with my team itself. But because I had investors and I had to give them like explanations monthly, I just felt like an extra pressure that, to be fair, we did not needed the money because we were still
This
like
is brilliant.
bootstrap.
This is
I could
brilliant
bootstrap.
advice.
I
Yeah.
could bootstrap, and then because I made this mistake, because and why I made this mistake, it was not because I was like, oh, let's go to Shark Tank to get some free advertisement in television. It was more because I was like, I need a marketing budget. I was a marketeer by the time, so I had no idea. For me, it was like, I need a marketing budget, and I'm going to invest in marketing to attract users to my platform. Ta-da! But then I was like, yeah, but then the cost of acquisition of those users is not paying off to the lifetime value, or even the margin that I had, because it was a marketplace of beauty products that were actually affordable. So my margin was like this.
Okay.
And then, but I only found out after I had those investors. So I remember that I went to bed because I'm very committed, and like my very first experience as a founder itself. So I treated my investors as if they were my bosses, you know. That's also
Yeah.
something you should not do. Like tip number 3, like your investors are not your bosses. But I only knew the corporate dynamic, you
Yeah.
know.
You didn't know any better. I mean, this was your first venture. You had dealing with. I mean, okay. I mean, this is brilliant advice, and I think Ralph also made Ralph in the comment section here. And I mean, like he said, it's a really interesting story. And for startups, the best in startup funding is probably equity in crowdfunding. And I think that's a brilliant comment, Ralph. Thank you for that. So, Mayte, just before I do want to move on now past this now. So, where is the business now, or how did you eventually leave that business?
Okay. So we pivoted. We were like evolving the business and growing. I had trouble fundraising because of my cap table and because of the cost of acquisition ratio with lifetime value, and it was not something I was able to solve in a timing before my runway actually matched. So we went out of cash basically, and I started to use my personal savings, you know, to pay my employees, to pay for like WeWork. By the time we had an office at WeWork, and I remember being like, damn, like I cannot pay WeWork next week, you know. And I was basically like doing the weekly plan because I was like living by week after week, you know. And the pressure was intense. At one point, I was, you know, I had a lot of debts under my name, my personal name, not the company's name. And I had a burnout, but like a horrible one. My kidneys stopped working. Like I was 98 years old, and I started to feel like a little bit ill, you know, but I was just like on my road show, and I was, you know, like already talking to the tier 4 investors because I was like being denied by the tier 1, 2. Some of them were like, yeah, solve this cap table issue and come back and we'll make it work. And then I was feeling ill, and I went to the hospital just to get, you know, I was like, I have a bunch of meetings tomorrow. So I need like, give me a shot of whatever because I need to wake up and feel okay. And then they ran blood exams on me. And I remember like the doctors, like physician's face, he was like, your white globes are 300% higher than they should be. Something is wrong with your system. We're moving you to the intensive care unit. But I was like this. I was complaining that my iPhone was running out of battery. Like I was completely functional. I had no idea this was happening. And then I remember a little after this because I went to the ICU and I kind of got a little bit sedated. And it was horrible. I had a process called sepsis, which is like a general infection. So my kidney, my liver, and my stomach stopped working, and the physicians reversed that. So, like 50% of folks who have sepsis, they die. It's one of the most it's top 3 causes of death at hospitals. It's very severe. But because I was young, I was able to recover myself, my metabolism, real quick with antibiotics and stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I left the hospital, I was
Burnout.
like, done. You know, like,
No, I mean,
I'm dead. I cannot be an entrepreneur because I'll be like 6 feet under. So
yeah. No, I mean,
moment.
okay. And I mean, I think and that's nothing to be embarrassed about, and it's not an uncommon thing. It's happened somewhat happened to me with one of my startups, burnout and stress, and it all comes down to work-life balance. And you think you're young, you think you're invincible, you think you can take on hour nights sleep over a prolonged period of time. It does catch up, and I mean, quite rightly so. You were young at the time, and it's obviously a tough decision. But I think that whole learning has prepared you to do what you are doing today. And I think that's amazing. So
Yeah,
moving on now,
I was broke and I
yeah,
needed
the thing
money.
is, so then
So I was like,
you
I need dollars, because I'm gonna make money in dollars and I'm gonna pay in reais. So I'm gonna like hack the process because dollar currency is 5 times higher than the Brazilian currency. That's when I started to apply for American positions.
so that's amazing. A lot of people go in entrepreneurship journeys, then they go the corporate route, and then they go the entrepreneurship. I mean, your story is not untypical. It's just super interesting, and I think it's absolutely inspiring. And next, moving on now, we have maybe like 15 minutes left. And if anyone in the audience does have any questions, please shoot them through in the chat. And this recording will be obviously be posted on YouTube, and I'll share it with Mayte as well. The one thing I did want to discuss, and because it's diversity month, and you being a woman in tech, being a woman in business, what were some of the hurdles you faced as a woman, and how did you get over them? Just so the people that are in the audience, whether it's guys or girls, ladies or men, what did you face? How did you get over them, and what advice would you give to women in tech or women trying to establish themselves or a career in business?
That's an awesome question. I would answer this. When I was an entrepreneur, I was completely ignorant about this. And it actually helped me because I wasn't able to tell the sexism, when you're just like, oh, maybe it's because I'm a first time entrepreneur, finding excuses to justify those microaggressions and comments until one day I was like, okay, this is not right. I remember the day I was doing a roadshow. It was this angel investor, and also like tip number 5, 6. I don't know how many tips I gave this night, but be aware with self-proclaimed angel investors, because especially those who are going to be like, I can mentor you and you can give me 10% of your company. When you have like an early stage company, you tend to be like, oh, this is not valuable at all. So you're going like, oh, my uncle has 5%. And then this guy that I met in college, I'm going to offer him like 10%. You're just giving away your equity. And equity is the most expensive money you can lend, give, or whatever, It's like, it's more expensive than actual cash. And I remember this, self-proclaimed angel investor. He was like, my co-founder, the CTO, was also a woman. And I was, at that part of the pitch where you're like, and this is my team. He was like, only women? And I was like, yes. And he was like, maybe you're going to need a male CFO in the future. I remember like,
But that
because like we don't know how to count.
Because that could be bad advice, or he might have thought to. I mean, that's also horrible advice from the grand scheme. So, how did you react to that?
I remember that I was shocked, and at first I was like, I mirrored him like a male CFO, like can you because I was, and then he was like, oh no, it's not what I meant. It's just because guys tend to have more to get along better with science and tech, engineering, math. And I was like, guys tend to get along better. I was mirroring him to a point that I was like, do you have any data or evidence to support that? He was so embarrassed because of course he did not, because he was being sexist. So yes, I faced in the US, because I went for a road show here when I was an entrepreneur, because of Draper. They offered us this opportunity at the LPGP meeting they do in SF once a year. So I was there to, you know, it was more like soft meetings. It was not like a proper road show, you know, but you could meet people like more like a shaking hands. And I remember like, you know, like that was the very first moment that I realized that I was a Latina. Because when you were born in Brazil, you do not wake up and be like, you're not a foreigner. You're in Brazil, you're a Brazilian. So it's like a whole different existence in the world. And here I kind of realized there's another layer of being a minority, that I'm not only a woman, but I'm a Latina. So it's like, okay, there's an intersectionality layer to, there's two layers of prejudice that you have to face sometimes,
Yeah.
especially because Latina women are very, very usually being stereotyped as, you know, like, I don't know, like samba dancers, or this hypersexualization. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like annoying because it's a stigma that follows you, and you're just there like,
And I get that. I mean, that totally makes sense. So, what one piece of advice would you give to not only Latinas trying to make themselves successful in the US, even local females, regardless of their ethnicity? What one piece of advice would you give them when trying to either get over this hurdle, which you experienced, or just a general piece of advice that you've been someone's told you that and you've actually utilized it in the way you go about doing your work?
if you're there, this tip is for women that are listening to this. If you're there, you're qualified. Because so many times, because of this hostile environment, I used to second guess myself. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm just here because I'm cute. Maybe I'm just
Yeah,
here because I'm charismatic. Maybe I'm just here because they need a woman to fill the quota. Maybe I'm just here, you know, and you start to feel like this
I
imposter
love
syndrome.
that. Yeah,
And
it's a real thing, right? Imposter
yes,
syndrome. Yeah,
and I used to tell myself, if I'm here, I'm qualified. If I'm here, I'm qualified. Second tip is like, you know, so many times, and this is for the Latina audience that happen to be listening to me, or even foreigners. So many times when you come from like a third world country, it's it's larger than your individual belief, but you tend to shrink yourself because you're like, ooh, I'm not as good as they are because they went to Yale, you know, like Stanford. I don't know. Like, ooh, I'm like, you know, I don't have that kind of pedigree. You know, I don't speak proper language because I speak broken English. Ooh, you know, like, and I used to tell this to myself at a point that I got frozen and like, and anxious and just nervous. And then I listened to Michelle Obama's podcast, and she said something that I was like, this is perfect and brilliant. And I know it's true because in a smaller proportion, I faced that, you know. She was like, I've been to every table you can imagine of. Like, I had dinner with princes and billionaires and tech moguls and CEOs. Believe me, they're not that smart. And then when she said that, I was like, oh my God, this is 100% sure. Because even in my small sample in Brazil, like, you know, I used to hang with the top investors, the top CEOs, and I remember to, you know, sometimes think to myself, like, damn, they're just humans, like they're not that smart, you know. So when I was like anxious and nervous, even to do a pitch on Shark Tank or whatever, I was like, oh my God, they're not that smart. They're just humans, you know.
uh, I mean, I think that's brilliant advice, and I think one thing, I mean, that the fact that you are there, you deserve to be there. I mean, it just doesn't get handed to you a lot of the times, and I think women forget that other other people that fall within these groups of inequality will also face that. So I think that's brilliant advice. So we have come to the end, and it is unfortunate because I would talk to you for 2 hours if I could. I do have one question from Ralph before we end off, and I think try to answer this question as concisely as possible. The question is, are you looking to do another startup? So the way I'll rephrase that is yes or no, and if so, what industry would it be?
Good question, Hall. So many times I'm like, should I stay or should I go now?
I mean, there's a song after that as well. So
If I stay, it will be trouble. If I go, it will be double. Something like this.
Yeah.
What I think about this is like, right now, I do not see myself starting another company, especially a startup. I would say maybe one day, like a lifestyle business, not not aiming to be a unicorn or something like this, because that kind of pace and race got me sick, literally. The super growth oriented 10x growth per month, and if I did, I would bootstrap for a long time and maybe fundraising with family offices, but not venture capitalists, not anymore. So one day, who knows? Right now, I'm committed to my book, my work at TBWA as director of business strategies. We work for like Apple, Disney, McDonald's, most valuable brands in the US and the world. So I'm committed to adapting to the US culture, because even though I've been here for 2 years, it was pandemic. I had to go to Brazil for 10 months. It's kind of a messy beginning. Now I just want to launch my book here in the US, a proper launch with a publisher, finish my master's, start my PhD here. And I am an entrepreneur, if you think about it, because
entrepreneurial heart.
the book is a business for me. Like, I invest money on Amazon and I do the whole performance strategy, to acquire the leads. And I also give a lot of corporate trainings and they pay me to do that. So I have a company for consulting and for publishing. So I am an entrepreneur right now. I'm not like a startup entrepreneur anymore. And I doubt I would do that anytime soon. And if I did, my terms, like I'm going to be very, very strict about boundaries and how I'm going to run this.
Well, again, that's an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much. I think everyone in the audience really appreciates your feedback. You have such a unique story. I think one that you should be proud of if you're not already. I think the world is your oyster, and I'm really looking forward to see where you progress next. And potentially one day when you do have a startup, we can bring you back on and discuss that. And I mean, there might be another time where I'd like to bring you on to discuss the book and discuss what you're doing here in the US, because I know you've only recently arrived here again after your long wait in Brazil. So again, thank you so much. Everyone in the audience, this will obviously be recorded and we will share this on our YouTube channel. Again, Startup Grind is a global community of entrepreneurs, investors, and business tycoons, I would say, in some regard. Look out for our future events. We are coming to an end of this year, and hopefully in the new year we can have in-person events. Having said that, thank you so much, and good night, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye, guys.